Conversations with Asha and Steve, where communication matters. Join us as we discuss effective ways to communicate, bridge the gaps, and build long-lasting relationships within your business and life. Here are your hosts, Asha Prasad and Steve Harper.
Hey, Dr. Asha, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Steve. How are you? Happy Friday.
I'm fantastic. I did our intro music, and I hit
Uh-huh.
it right on the mark this time. I think we have it down to an
Yes,
exact
see?
science. I will screw other things
Cool.
up today, I'm sure, but we're off to a good start. All right. So, welcome to Conversations with Asha and Steve. I am Steve Harper, and this is my amazing co-host, Dr. Asha Prasad. Asha, what's going on today on this fine Friday?
Gosh, what's going on? A lot of rain. We were talking about this. It's
Yeah.
it's raining over here, but you know what? It's okay. It's just I don't know, like we were talking. It's kind of a funky Friday.
Funky Friday. Well, before it gets too funkified, we need to promote one time at least your new book, the release of the new book. And I, of course,
Oh,
just
yeah.
popped it up here and I just covered your face with it. But
You know, Jason,
the Chrysalis
I'm fine with
Awakening
that.
has released. We actually did a live stream on this last week, which was,
Mm-hmm.
got really positive comments from people. I hope it manufactured some good numbers in sales for the book. But
Yeah.
we did a recording that's going to release for my other podcast, the Ripple Effect podcast, with yours truly. We did a deeper dive interview on the book
Mm-hmm.
and had a great time doing that. So that's going to premiere a little later today. But I want to encourage everybody that might be watching today to be sure to go out and get your copy of the Chrysalis Awakening. You are going to love this book. And of course, I had it here right before we went on air, and then I stuck it in my other office. So, so the title is up there. You can see it. Look for Dr.
Yes.
Asha Prasad, and the chrysalisawakeningbook.com is the website you go
Right.
to get more information on that. So just wanted to make
Absolutely.
sure to plug that because I'm super proud of you. The book is amazing, and it is going to change lives. It really is, for sure.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. It's been phenomenal, the feedback that I've been getting and the interactions and communications that I've been having. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, for those of you just joining us, this is Conversations with Asha and Steve. This is our podcast that we've decided to occasionally go live stream. More than occasionally. You're making me do it almost every week. So we are now broadcasting on YouTube. We're broadcasting
Mm-hmm.
on Facebook, Conversations with Asha and Steve Facebook page. I think my personal page, maybe your
Mm-hmm.
personal page. We're on Twitter. Where else are we?
We're on LinkedIn
Yeah, we're on
officially
LinkedIn. We're
as
officially
of a
on
couple of
LinkedIn.
weeks. So,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, so today's topic actually was pretty interesting. We posted a couple days ago that we're going to be talking about toxic people. Toxic people be
Mm-hmm.
gone, I think is how we titled it, right? What do we need to
Yes.
do to get rid of toxic people? And I'm kind of anxious to have this conversation because you and I have, as of late, experienced quite a bit of toxicity in our personal and
Yeah.
professional lives. And so we are coming at this from, bona fide experience. But we
Absolutely.
work with a lot of coaching clients that deal with this, right?
Yeah.
How to deal with toxic employees, how to deal with toxic, customers, and
Yeah.
a lot of interpersonal relationships, have that
Mm-hmm.
frame of reference from toxicity perspective. And so, I'm anxious to dive in. What is your take on toxic people, other than they suck?
Yeah. I mean, they're not very nice to be around, right? Because they suck the energy out of you. That's for sure.
Yeah,
But you know what, Steve? I think we all deal with it from time to time. In fact, I think we all not only deal with it, but sometimes we may be the toxic one
yeah.
if we're not aware. So I think
Are you looking at me?
I think that I know I'm looking at me. No, so,
I have a mirror
but
right in front of my face. So yeah,
I know. But I mean, I think it's something to be aware of because sometimes, I was talking to a client, this was just a couple of months ago, and he was dealing with some serious toxicity. He did not name it that. He did not call it that. He
yeah,
didn't even realize it. But it was just in the signs. I was just like, how do you feel whenever you walk away from that person? He's like, well, I don't feel really good. He said, I'm always justifying myself. I'm always defending myself. And I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. And I had to really walk him through it because
sure,
he wasn't seeing it as this kind of toxicity or negativity.
yeah.
He really was. And then once the light bulb went on, he was just like, oh, wait a second. I got to evaluate everything right now because maybe these aren't the best working relationships. So I think we all will deal with it, but we got to got to kind of know like what to look for also. Sometimes it may
Absolutely.
not be very obvious,
So,
right?
I'm curious. So, was this something that,
Hmm.
kind of came up, or was it something that was kind of creating some, challenges and blockers for him,
Hmm.
and that's why you guys went down that path, or, or had he reached his
Hmm.
limit, which is often what I find when it finally,
Right.
people reach their boiling point, and kind of explode. That's generally when people start unloading on, what they're facing with these toxic people in their personal and professional
Right.
lives.
Well, for him, it was more about blocking, like proceeding, like forward movement in the business,
Oh,
and he couldn't figure out because he had two people on staff at the time, and he's eliminated those people, and actually has helped them find other jobs elsewhere. To be honest, I
really?
mean, even though they were not, yeah, which I think kudos to him because they were clearly not looking out for the best interests of the company and what he was trying to do. They just didn't agree, and they just weren't saying it. Instead of not saying it, they were just kind of really standing in the way and being manipulative and doing a lot of things that were undermining. But and that's how that came up. So I was
Yeah,
just like, well, wait a second, we need to evaluate what's going on here.
yeah.
So yeah.
Well, so what are some steps that you typically recommend to your folks that you're working with,
Hmm.
like this particular individual? What did
Hmm.
what did you walk us through the process that you go through when you've identified that toxic person and ultimately what you're doing to coach them through that process of how to deal with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, Steve, it depends on who it is. I mean, is it,
Yeah.
because, it's a different thing
Well, this
when it
this
comes
sounds
to
like it was
family and blood.
a business person, right?
Yeah,
So this was a
exactly.
business connection, right?
In this case, it was a business case. It was an employee in his
Ah,
company.
well,
And so it was an employee for a very long time and also,
oh,
over time became friends. So that
yeah,
was one of those things
tough.
that he trusted. He really, really trusted that they were, having his best interest, the company's best interest, the team's best interest, and it just wasn't the case.
Yeah,
So with him, it was really breaking it down and just looking at, okay, you can appreciate the good side of it, but what is really happening? What is leaving you walking away every conversation, every group meeting, every meeting that you guys are having feeling bad, feeling like like you're beating your head up against the wall kind of thing. And so we had to walk through it and break it down, and then we
sure.
had to break down also other team members too. And in that process, that's what I like to do with people, no matter who it is, whether it's business or personal, family, whatever it is. You
Yeah,
have to kind of look at, are you going to cut ties with these people? Or if you're not going to cut ties with these people, then how are you going to be able to stand up for yourself and set those boundaries to not be affected by that toxicity and negativity?
absolutely. No, that's good. Yeah, if you're just joining us, welcome to Conversations with Asha and Steve. We're broadcasting across multiple platforms. We think we have visibility into everybody's comments or questions, so feel free to whatever platform that you are on, please post those so that we can hear your perspective. Comments, questions,
Hmm.
etc. We'll put them up on the screen so everybody sees them, and certainly happy to tackle any perspectives that you'd like us to tackle on this topic. It's an important one, I think. Asha, that
Yeah.
being able to identify toxic people that are in your life. The negativity. You mentioned early on as we came on. They're a huge energy suck, and I found that in my own
Yeah.
personal life. Right, when you have that
Yeah.
toxicity, it can actually permeate every area of your being.
Yes.
How you respond, how you
Yes.
react, it impacts your creativity. It responds how open you are to other people. Because if you've just
Yeah.
had a toxic interaction with somebody, the last thing you want to do is go have a positive interaction with somebody. Well, at least
It's
I
true.
don't. I want to go curl up in a corner and just suck my thumb.
Exactly.
So it becomes
With your blankie.
with my blanket,
Yeah.
my binky. Yes, my binky.
Oh, your binky. Sorry.
My whoopee. My blanket is my whoopee. But
Okay.
Tom actually just asked a question. I think it's a good one. What if I have
Hmm.
a toxic business partner? Ooh, Tom, thanks for the question. Don't know where you
It's a
actually
great
came in from.
question.
Sorry about that. I don't know what platform
Yeah.
you're providing that question on, but thank you for watching today. That's a good question. What do you do if you have a toxic business partner?
Yeah.
Because that's very much like a marriage. I mean, in some
It is.
respects, it's even worse than a marriage.
It is. It truly
you
is.
know, it could be easier to get a divorce from your spouse than it can be from a business
Then
partner. So,
exactly.
what are your
I
thoughts about
mean,
that?
You know what, Steve? I think it's really important to sit down together and talk about it. Like you've got to be able. And I mean, I don't know how long they've been business partners, but I think that just like in a marriage, you got to have open communication. You
Yeah.
got to be able to say the good, the bad, the ugly, and that's it. And be respectful of each other, but be able to be, because if you know that you are with somebody that is toxic, you got to make a
Yeah.
decision of, am I going to continue on? Are we going to do this? Are things going to change and pivot, or what's up? And I think, straight communication is the key with that. How about you, Steve? What would you say with that?
Well, I'd say, advice to anybody that's going to go into any kind of business partnership, you should expect that this could potentially be the outcome. You could be the toxic person, the
Yeah.
other person could be the toxic person, but
Yeah.
very, very few business partnerships ever, you know, especially if you're friends ahead of time, ever end well in most
That's
cases.
true. That
And
is
so
true.
I always like to say, you always start with the end in mind, which is sometimes why you have to put that potential thought process on the table. What if one of us goes
Hmm.
off the rails? What if one of us is no longer a good actor within the business? What do we do? What triggers do we have? And part of that is how you incorporate. Part of it is how you build your business and your partnership agreements, how to deal with
Right.
disputes and resolutions relative to that. But I have found and seen many relationships be broken apart by the stresses of business, cash
Yeah.
flow, contribution, of effort, etc. Those
Yeah.
things
That's
tend to
true.
really weigh heavily on a business relationship. And I'm not kidding. It is very much like a marriage. When you go into partnership with
It
somebody and you
is.
say, hey, we're going to throw in on this idea, or we've got this great product or great service, everybody
Hmm.
loves that thought process early on. But, when you get to, or if you get to that point where
Hmm.
it has to be dealt with, where somebody has, is no longer benefiting the business, what are you going to do, to,
Yeah.
to transact that? And it's like any other common contract. Nobody wants to enforce those things, but it's really,
Right.
it's really always in design there to help guide and direct what happens if things don't go the way we expect them to go. And so I think that's
Yeah.
one piece of advice I give to anybody that's considering a business partnership is you have to think about that toxicity happening down the road
Hmm.
and what you're going to do to deal with it. Once you're in a partnership, however, it becomes a lot more difficult. And I think
Yeah.
Asha's advice, sitting down and saying, look, this cannot continue. This is, the challenges
Hmm.
that this is creating, whether it be us constantly fighting and bickering in front of the kids, so to speak, the employees, they see it, sense
Yeah.
it, they feel it, or whether it's impugning our culture, from an organization perspective, whether we
Yeah.
have dramatic differences in terms of what we want to do with the business going forward, the strategy, the direction, et cetera, where we make our investments, do we take on funding, et cetera. There's all this plethora of things that come up. And it's usually the person that doesn't feel heard, doesn't feel understood, that ends up being the bad apple, right? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of
That's true.
times, if you're the bigger person and you're trying to deal with this person and you don't have a way out that's not messy, sitting down and saying, look, obviously your attitude and the issues that are coming up, it's not good. It's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for me. So what do we do to
Right.
solve this? How do we
Yeah.
fix this? And unfortunately, by the time, and the word toxic is such a trigger word for a lot of people, because by the time
It
it's
is.
there, I mean, you're already looking at that person as kind of the poison pill, right? They are,
Right.
they're not somebody you even want to, sit down with and have a conversation. But it's so essential, especially as business owners. If the business has got some viable future, then somebody has to be the mature adult in the room and call the meeting, sit down and say, okay, what are we going to do? I've suggested to, many, corporate clients that I've worked with over the years that, people go to counseling for, marital problems or romantic
Hmm.
relationships. And there are business, believe it or not, business
Yeah.
psychologists and psychiatrists that will actually see you and give you couples therapy as
Yeah.
partners, because it may be worth saving. And there may be a way to overcome some of that animosity and that anger that has been built up on both sides. But it's very possible that your partner doesn't even know that toxic, that they are the toxic one. They just
Yeah.
are trying to, hold their line, or what they think is that, their what they're due in terms of respect, or, say at the table, et cetera, but they don't realize that they're the ones that are actually causing the biggest amount of conflict. So communication, I
And
think, is
Steve,
key. Go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to piggyback on that because you mentioned something about the fact that they may not even know, and that's so true. And a lot of times, that's why I said, communication, because of the fact a lot of times we don't know what's behind it.
Yeah.
There may be something, you may be viewing them as this, just toxic person, this being that's there. And maybe that is totally,
Yeah.
totally not what's going on at all. And if you don't, and I've seen that happen with a lot of business partners where they just don't communicate and don't communicate and don't, and it just builds up just like a marriage, like you
Yeah.
were saying. I mean, it's so, so very, very important. You got to have that open communication because there may be something behind that that is causing that
Yeah.
behavior or whatever it is that's happening. So,
Well, I always tell my clients, people generally don't start off as toxic, and
true, very true.
something has happened, especially in the
Yeah.
business environment, to cause that, right? And a lot of times, it's often resentment. It's issues or problems that have come up
Yes.
that we haven't dealt with, and we're not dealing well with. And I always tell people resentment is the super secret promise of revenge, right? When they
Yes,
have
it
a resentment
is.
against you or what decision you made or
Yeah.
you not consulting them or you just ignoring what they asked you to do, they may not come for you today, but they will eventually come to you and come for you. And that generally rears its ugly head in the toxicity they bring to the work
Yeah.
environment. And so I think that one of the things that I think ultimately diffuses a lot of that animosity that tends to build up between business partners
Hmm.
specifically is just being the bigger person and saying, look, things haven't gone the way that we expected them to. We still have, and I assume that you're committed to our success as an organization and as a partner. And, are you okay? Like something is clearly not right
Right.
here. And if it's within my power to fix it, I want to fix it. And having the ability and the courage, I think, to open up that dialogue
Yeah.
and share that and say, look, I'm willing to do whatever. Well, that at least opens the door, right? And it at
Yeah.
least,
That's true.
whatever they thought of you as a business partner or however that relationship came about, they at least at one point had a moniker of, some sort of respect for you. And this at least puts that back on the table for something that you can maybe try and regain in their eyes. Because
Right.
I truly believe that some people, there are just flat out evil people, right? That are just toxic by nature. Then
Right.
there are other people that get that based on circumstances. Like I said, those
Right.
resentments, those issues, the circumstances around, whatever has, developed, I think potentially has that
Hmm.
potential impact. And I think you can course correct that a little bit by just being open and honest and saying, look, what can I do to solve this? What can I do to fix this? Much like what you're
Hmm.
talking about.
Yeah, I think that that's really important. That's a great question. That is a really,
Yeah,
really great
yeah.
question, Tom. Thank you
Tom,
so
thank you
much
so much. Well,
for
right
posing
on
that
the
question.
heels of that, what do
Mhm.
you do? Jane, this is a great question. What do you do if you have a toxic boss?
Fire him or her.
How do you guys do it over
Well,
there in the Netherlands? It seems like it's a reverse kind of power trip right there. If
I
you
know,
have the
I
ability
know. I
to,
just,
I mean,
no,
over
in
here in
an
America, the
ideal
boss is the
world.
one in control. What? Yeah, I don't understand,
I
Ash.
know, I know. No, it's that's a
That
that's a
is a
really
great
great
question,
question.
Jane. Yeah,
Steve, you want to take that first?
yeah, because I've been a toxic
Yeah.
boss. I mean, I know.
Okay.
I,
Go on. Yeah.
I think number one, Jane, the situation, much like the business partnership, having the courage and
Yeah.
confidence to sit down and have that conversation and say, I don't know if you see what you're doing to the team. I don't know if you see how
Hmm.
you're treating people, but something doesn't seem right. Are you okay? I actually I'm reminded when I was a sales rep a long, long time ago. I remember a guy that had a reputation for
Hmm.
being a really just a horrible boss. And one of the guys
Right.
that I knew, kind of in my sales territory, had talked about this complete change that he saw come about him. This guy, you could
Hmm.
never do anything right from how sharp the pencils were to whether the
Right.
reports were at the right font and were they on time. And he was just a really difficult individual, and everybody hated
Hmm.
working for him. But because they were in the industry they felt like they were kind of committed to it and didn't have many options to go elsewhere. And they I remember us having a beer and we're talking about it. And I said, well, what do you know about this guy? And he said, what do you
Mhm.
mean? And I said, well, I mean, do you know, is this, like, has he always been this way? He's like, yeah, I've always been this way since I've worked here. I mean, it's always been
Right.
the guy's just a jerk. And honestly, I wouldn't have taken the job if I'd known ultimately I'd be moved into this department. And I said, well, have you ever tried to connect with him, right? Have you ever had to try and, have a
Mhm.
conversation just to get to know him outside of that? And he's like, oh, no, like he is 100%
Yeah.
business. And I said, well, have you ever thought about trying, right? Look around his office, see
Right.
if you see anything that, that just gives you some inkling of who he is outside the office. And he said,
Right.
well, it's the most sterile inhuman office you could ever imagine. Aside from the whip that's on the wall, there's not much to go on. He said, but he does have a picture of his little boy. And I said, well, ask him
Yeah.
about his kid, right? So,
Yeah.
he calls me a couple weeks later. He said, holy crap, I did what you told me to do. And he said, oh my God, I thought I was going to get fired. Thank you. And I'm like, oh, it didn't go well. And I'm like, hey,
Oh.
you weren't paying
Yeah.
me for my advice. I'm just going to tell you that right now. But he said, no, actually, it was quite surprising. He said, so I went in. He said, basically, for his daily chew out is what he called it. He said, but I went in at the end of the
Mhm.
week, and he said he was getting chewed out about something he hadn't done right. And, he and I had actually talked about how he took that feedback. Thank you, sir. Thank you for
Mhm.
giving that feedback to me. I'll try harder, right? And he said, and I
Right.
started doing that earlier in the week, and I could tell that he was like, hey, what are you doing here? You normally are
Exactly.
quiet, or
Something's going on
you
here.
never say anything.
Yeah.
But he said on this particular Friday, he said, he had gotten done chewing me out, and it was kind of like, you're dismissed. This is it.
Mhm.
And he said, sir, I've never asked you about your son. I saw the
Mhm.
picture on your desk, or the bureau actually behind him. He said, how old is he? And he said it was
Mhm.
like this brain scramble. Like all of a sudden, this guy is
Yeah.
like, why are you thinking about my kid? Why are you, he said he wanted to
Exactly.
say it, but he didn't, right? You could see the cogs turning. And
Right.
he said, oh, that's Billy. He's 9. And he said, oh, that's great. It looks like he's a
Yeah.
baseball player, right? And the guy he just stops, right? All this stone
Mhm.
face look that he had just kind of started to melt. And he turned around, he looked at the picture himself, and he said, yeah, that was taken a few years ago when he was in Little League. And he said, well, you got to be super proud of him. He's a handsome young man. He said, does he
Mhm.
have baseball, baseball this weekend? And, just trying to
Right.
engage, right? Kind of like we had talked
Right.
about. And the guy just let out this like big, kind of breath. And he said, I don't
Mhm.
know. He said, I haven't seen him in nearly a year and a half. And he was like, really? And he said, yeah,
Mm.
my wife got fed up with my my way of acting, and took him, and I haven't seen him. And so he
Wow.
said, I talk to him maybe once a week, but I don't know what he's he's into, and I don't even know if he's still playing baseball. And this guy, of course, is like taken back,
Like
because like this all of a sudden took a very dramatic
exactly.
turn. And he said,
Exactly.
this guy actually teared up in his eyes, and he said, nobody out there likes me, right? And
Mm.
my buddy said, no. We all hate
At least
you.
he was honest, I mean,
He said, well, what
yeah.
else was I going to do? Like, it was just like came up, and he goes, and I'm kind of
Yeah.
paraphrasing. This is many years ago. This question happened, or this conversation happened. But he said, the funny thing was, he said, he said, I didn't, I realize I have a lot of problems, and I take it out on you
Mhm.
guys in ways that I shouldn't. And he said, and that's probably why my marriage ended. He said, I was raised
Right.
where you couldn't do anything wrong ever. And
Mm.
my dad was in the
Mhm.
military, and there was, just an expectation of deliverable. And he said, like, everything from, being a youth into how I performed at sports, how I did my schoolwork, and what I did in college, and the career path. And, this company rewarded me for my diligence and my directness. And,
Mhm.
I've raised up, and, now I'm the head of this division, and I walk in here every day, and I see everybody just, bury their head in their desks. And he said, it doesn't give me any pleasure to see
Mm.
that, but then it irritates me. So then I find something to pick on,
Right.
and this guy said, we all want to do a good job, and we're all here because we are committed to the job, but sometimes it's almost too much to worry about the
Mhm.
paycheck that we get. And you saw this guy, and he literally got up, and he offered his hand, this boss, and he said, "Thank you for
Mhm.
being honest with me." And
Yeah.
my buddy was like, I thought I was going from being fired to suddenly making a connection with this guy. And he
Right.
said, it wasn't an easy transition, but over the course of the next several weeks and eventually, they ended up working together for several years. This guy
Mhm.
changed. And it really came down to that one little thing to see what this guy was going through. And it turned out, as he got to know the guy, all that anger and all that angst was just manufactured. And every time he walked into that office, he saw that picture, which reminded him of the family
Right.
situation. And then he was already on edge from that. And then he saw how people responded and reacted. And it was just kind of an interesting turn of events because the guy recognized that
Mhm.
he was toxic, but didn't really know how to get it undone. And so he really ended up
Right.
depending on my buddy a lot to say, was that over the top? Did I go too far? Did I, was I too
Right.
harsh? And next thing you know, this guy ended up becoming a pretty, successful executive with that
Yeah.
organization. And then my buddy continued on his career path. But you never know what people are going through. And a lot of times
It's true.
there's a situation where toxicity has, it just permeates every sense of your being. And so I don't know, that story has always stuck with me because it's a good reminder for all of us not to initially judge the book by its cover.
Yep.
We're often judged by our actions. We're often judged by our words, but sometimes you have to have the courage to call it on the carpet when it needs to be called. So
Yeah, no, definitely, Steve. That's a great reminder. It's a great story because I know quite a few episodes ago we talked about those gut reactions, those initial
yeah,
reactions, like going from 0 to 100 in just an instant, forgetting that there's a person behind whatever the action or whatever the upset is. We've got to remember, I mean, we are people and we need to connect on that level. We just never know what's going on for somebody.
yeah.
We don't know what's going on in their minds, what they've experienced. Have they had a bad day? Maybe like what you're talking about, something has happened. And until you get to know somebody, if that's what you want to do, now I get it. Some people don't even want to, they don't even want to go there.
Yeah.
And if you make that decision, it's okay, but then make a decision that takes you out of that scenario, out of that situation. It's really up to you. But remember, we're dealing with people at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and we've got to be able to connect on that human level.
Well, and I'd say, Jane, if talking to this boss doesn't work, as uncomfortable and as challenging as it might be, if that circumstance doesn't look like it will ever change, then
Hmm.
you've got no choice but to move on, right? In a lot of,
Yeah.
a lot of respects. That can be tough, especially if you're in a job with people you like other than the boss. If you're in an environment that really, you're being able to leverage your skill sets or you're doing work that you
Hmm.
love, it can be difficult. But what I've often found is that unless that person is prepared and willing to change, it often never does. And unfortunately, the
Right.
problem with, that kind of environment, if you don't even see the inkling of being able to somehow impact or influence that boss to change in some respects, then that environment likely is never going to get better, which just means that you end up carrying that forward with yourself. And so that has effects that
Exactly.
aren't good on your mental health, as Asha would say, for sure, and your physical health, and just, the overall
Yeah.
stress that it puts on you and the other relationships that you may have as an extension of that business. So I don't know, at
Yeah.
some point, if stepping up to the plate and having a conversation is not in the cards, then, you know, popping open the internet to look for other roles that might
Yeah.
appreciate, have bosses that will appreciate you for who you are and not provide that toxic environment might be the best course of action.
Yeah, definitely. Steve, I think that, no matter what position you're in, you can always lead by example. You
Yeah.
don't have to match the same level of, toxicity, negativity, or whatever. You can always lead by example. And if that's not making an impact or working in a way that is changing things, then yes, absolutely.
Well,
Might have to consider just to move on.
I can't post this comment for some reason, but somebody asked and
Hmm.
said that, well, Steve, you said you were a toxic boss. In what way? Well, I will say I often got blinded by the direction we were needing to head as a company. So I tended to put more pressure
Hmm.
and effort on people. And it has cost me some relationships that I wish that it hadn't, because I didn't see it at the
Right.
time. And, you know, being in a situation where you're catching people doing things wrong is the biggest challenge, I think, if you're a toxic boss.
Hmm.
It's so easy to catch people doing things wrong, but it's almost easier if you're willing to catch them doing things right. And so, yeah, I had a person that worked for me 3 different times that kept coming back, and ultimately the last time, unfortunately, the situation unfolded in a way that I kind of wish it hadn't, because
Hmm.
I respect this person, I admire them, but I didn't see the damage I was causing by putting so much pressure and effort on them to deliver. And you get that, as a business owner, Asha, I know you've gone through this, right? As you're growing a
Yeah.
business, it can get hard for us to deal with the personal feelings of employees,
Yeah.
and as you're scaling and growing, there's so much to be done, and you feel like, as the business owner or the entrepreneur that starts that, there's just a tremendous amount of pressure. You have no idea, how much it's, somebody's,
Hmm.
needs something, and you're like, you don't have any idea how much that costs me, or you have no idea what
Right.
that's, what a
Right.
stretch it is for me to actually invest more into the business. And so the pressure mounts, and it can be difficult. But, the one thing I have recognized in myself is that's exactly the time that I need to take a step back. That's the time that I actually need to
Yeah.
say, who can do this job better than me? What do I need to delegate? We've talked about that on numerous episodes of this podcast,
Yeah.
that, finding what you're really good at. And if it is taking everything and being the, sort of the type A personality and sort of the traffic cop on every single decision, everything that needs to happen
Hmm.
with the business, you're probably creating a toxic work environment. And I've seen it myself, and I'm trying to overcome it. But it's one thing, and Asha, I think you'll agree with this. As an entrepreneur, you
Hmm.
have to be conscientious of it, right? Am I
You do.
crossing that
You
line?
do.
Am I, going to the
Exactly.
dark side? Am I becoming that person that nobody wants to work for? And if so, what am I going to do about it? And, Asha and I,
Yeah.
have been there, done that, and seen it. That's when you go and ask for help. That's when, as a leader, you go, find a
Yeah.
coach, you find a mentor, or, God love you, go get a psychiatrist or a psychologist
Yeah.
to figure out what's
Exactly.
going
No,
on,
it's
because there
true.
probably is something bigger going on. And for me, it was always a fear of failure, right? At the end of the day, it was, do
Right.
I have enough cash to make us go? And, will we survive the onslaught of competition, which means that pressure just mounted, and it manifested in ways that I wasn't very proud of in terms of how I treated certain people. So I acknowledge and recognize it, and have tried to make amends with as many of those folks as I can. But it's a learning process, even for those of us that seem to get
It
it now,
is.
right?
No, but it is. It is a learning process, and that's something to keep in mind for yourself as well. But be aware of it. Don't just take it for granted that you can just continue on that road, but be aware of it and learn from the mistakes,
Yeah.
learn from those situations.
So Asha, sorry, I just put this up really quickly, but
Sure.
Sheila, actually, it looked like it had addressed to you, but for some reason it cut this off. Asha, if
Yeah.
walking away is not possible, how can I stand up to a toxic person so they stop treating me so poorly?
Yeah, in a work situation, is that what she's asking in relationship
I don't
to? I
know.
mean, well, I guess
I
you know
would
what,
I
whether
would
it's
think, if
work or
not
personal.
walking away is probably a personal relationship, but I mean, how would you handle both?
Yeah.
I guess work or personal.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing about that is you've got to be able to stand up for yourself and set boundaries.
Yeah,
Whatever, and even if that is verbally, some people you're going to be verbally, you're going to say, "Listen, you know what? I don't want to speak with you. I don't want to have communication, or the only way I want to communicate is, through this way or whatever." And there's going to be people that are going to try to push you beyond that and disrespect your boundaries, okay?
yeah,
I mean, that's one of those things, but you've got to just be able to stand your ground and stand up for yourself and
yeah,
and you don't have to explain. This is something I can tell you from personal experience. I realized a long time ago, I don't have to explain to you from A to Z why I'm making the decisions that I'm making,
yeah,
period, because it is my right to have the decision, and it's your right to make your decisions that is good for you.
yeah,
And if that does mean that you're taking a distance, you're walking away from somebody, I mean, you can do it with as much compassion and kindness as you can, but really standing your ground and know that you have to stand up for yourself first and foremost. And there's no reason that you have to justify that in any
yeah,
way. I mean, Steve, I know you and I have had conversations about that. I've seen it I mean, I've experienced that, personally with myself, but I've seen it with a lot of my clients too, whether
yeah,
it's been personal or in professional relationships, and it's been really tough. But once they started to realize, like, hey, wait a second, I don't actually have to justify everything why I'm making this decision. It just doesn't feel good. It's not good for me. End of
Yeah.
story. That's it. But I think that's a really important one.
I think that's great. I mean,
Yeah,
that's great advice. I think ultimately, it comes down to a lot of people don't actually realize they're the ones that are in control, how you respond, how you
yeah,
react, and that
exactly.
it's ultimately your decision. And like you said, I think at some juncture, my good friend Donna Carlin talks about the fact that you're always polite and respectful to other people's opinions, especially if they are super negative, but say,
Right.
into discussion, right? This is the way I'm going. This is what I'm
Exactly.
doing, and this is how it's going to happen. I appreciate your perspective, but this conversation is over. And,
Yeah.
uh, what I find in a lot of situations is that toxic people tend to be bullies, and they
Yes.
love the fight. They love putting people on their back heel, and you take away
Yes.
all their power when you say, into discussion. I'm moving away, right? I'm walking away from
Exactly.
this. I'm like you said, Asha. This is the decision I made. I don't need to justify it for you.
Yeah.
I've given you my reasons, and the reasons that I have are the only ones that matter. For me, and
Right.
it can be a challenge. And Sheila, I think probably this sounds like it could be a personal relationship of some kind.
Hmm.
At some point, you have to say, if this person were no longer in my life, right, a year from now,
Yes.
how different would my life be? And
Yeah.
that can be difficult because I've actually coached folks through the you know untenable process of divorce. When they realize they've
Right.
just hit a wall and that relationship is no longer healthy for them, and
Right.
figuring out where and what they want to do and where they want to go. And when you don't have the weight of that toxic person holding you back, then it's kind of amazing what where you
Yeah.
potentially your mind will let you go, right? And where it could take you.
Exactly.
And it can be tough, right? If it is a personal relationship, if it's a family member, if it's a situation where you feel like that sense of obligation to that person, even the
Hmm.
business partnership, as we talked about earlier. Those things can be scary and they can be tough. But I can tell you from personal experience, I've walked away from business relationships that I didn't, I wasn't comfortable, on my own feeling like I could do it, but I've done it. And,
Hmm.
I'm so much better and have grown so much stronger because I did. And so I think
Right.
that, the only, I think that there's always the option of walking away, whether it's personal or professional.
Yes.
And,
Absolutely.
if you want to hit us up, Sheila, and talk, a little more specifics, Dr. Asha and I would, be happy to get on a call with you and give you some additional
Yeah.
insight and perspective there, maybe some assistance and help. I don't know your particular situation, and we definitely appreciate you tuning in from Nashville, but we're here if we can help you in any way, shape, or form. So,
Yeah.
Asha,
Absolutely.
we have
Yeah.
another one. So, I mean, we just kind of touched on this, but how do you deal with a toxic family member? You don't have any experience in this, right? I know I don't.
No, not at all.
Micah, thanks for the
Oh my
softball
God.
question. That one is going to be like really, really lovely for us to
I
take in.
know, right? Just-
Yeah. So, Asha, go
yeah.
for it.
Yeah. Well, I have to say it's the same thing. One of the things that I and this has been a learning process for me. I've had I don't want to say so many different relationships like this, but have had a few that have been more than their share of painful in dealing with, because I have the utmost respect for people in my family.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially elderly and that kind of thing, and so it was very hard to actually stand up and be like, wait a second, I am my own individual person,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's time that again, it's the same thing, standing up for yourself and being like, no, till
yeah,
here and no further. That's
yeah,
it. This is where we have to draw a line. And even if you have to hang up the phone sometimes even if you have to, not communicate, not respond, any of those things. Now, with family members, I think it's tough. I have not um like specifically said to anybody, you know what, I'm never talking to you again. I haven't done that. But what has happened is that I have drifted away so much. They didn't like the fact that I was standing up for myself. What happens is that, like what you were saying before, Steve, when you're dealing with a bully, they don't like the fact that you're not engaging them. You're not giving them fuel to their fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they actually find other people to go do that too. But it's just not going to be you,
Yeah.
you know?
So what you're saying is take that pain and put it on somebody else.
Yeah, but
Asha's
but I mean,
superpower.
that's their choice. I know exactly.
Don't pick on me. Go like pick on my sister or my cousin or whatever. Okay, I get it.
No, but it's a challenge though, Steve,
Yeah.
especially, I think with families, when you have dynamics in families and you have disagreements and you have all of that stuff, and it's going to come up.
Sure.
Again, communicating clearly. But sometimes people are just going to use a certain lens when they look at you, especially in a family dynamic. Like if you're the youngest, they're going to constantly look at you as the little punk kid that, doesn't stand on their own 2 feet and is just, whatever, can take the brunt of everything. And you can't change that, but you can stand up and show, again, lead by example in that scenario of how it can be and what you're going to willing to put up with and what you're not.
Yeah, especially when it's a family member, you can't.
Yeah.
There was a phrase that somebody told me. You can, you know, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family, right? and
That's true.
you're unfortunately stuck with certain people and certain individuals. And it's especially hard when they're toxic and you don't want to be around them. But I will say that you do have a choice, right? Like Asha said,
You do.
you can choose how to respond and react to those circumstances in
Mm-hmm.
that situation. And again, we talked earlier about taking away all that power just by removing yourself from the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, you can choose whether just because you're related doesn't mean that you have to spend any time with that person whatsoever. And
Yeah.
I know from personal experience, I have a family member that has taken a situation that has been, could have been kind of a unifying situation for our family, and completely used it quite the opposite, like, threw a torpedo
Right.
grenade right into our family unit. And
Mm.
it has caused a fair amount of stress and challenge. And what you realize is that I have a choice whether I'm going to, submit to that environment or continue to be a part of that process. And
Right.
I personally have chosen not to.
Right.
I'll do what I can, where I can, when I can. But if this person's
Yeah.
involved, I'm just not going to do it. Um, and it's funny because the bully always tries to goad you, right? By, wow,
Yes.
look, they're just, separating from the family, or they're acting like,
Yeah.
an insolent child and taking their toys and going home, and, working, trying to work that angle. But when that doesn't get the rise that they want or
Exactly.
expect,
Yeah.
what it ends up being for the other family members that are watching and seeing it, it becomes insolent noise, right? And like you said, Asha,
Yeah.
they end up finding some other target, right? Because if one
Yes.
target no longer presents itself to be there and accessible to take the abuse, a toxic person will go down the list and start looking, and eventually,
Yes.
and it's unfortunate, but I know a few people that basically have completely ostracized themselves from their families because they were that person, right? And eventually you run out of
Right.
people that are even going to listen to your BS. And I
Yeah.
think that that's the biggest challenge. I mean, when you compare and contrast that to a business environment, it's a little bit more difficult because, sometimes you just can't,
Yeah.
you're going to have to make a
I
call,
know.
whether if you've got that boss, like Jane brought up earlier, if you got that boss that you can't, separate so easily from,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to confront it in some capacity. And if confronting it is not an option, then choosing another direction for your career is. But, with family, nobody's holding your head to, gun to your head to show up for Thanksgiving dinner. And,
No.
nobody says that you have to be there for every major holiday or every birthday or
Right.
whatever. And sometimes just saying, I'm not submitting myself to that anymore, and walking away, at least for your perspective, is a good way to, preserve your mental health and your sanity.
Yeah, that's super important. And I mean, it is harder when it comes to family because there's so much emotion and history and background and so many different dynamics. But you got to take care of yourself,
Yeah.
and you can actually be more of a support sometimes to them by doing that.
Yeah.
From a distance. It really is. It's. I know it may sound strange, but it's true. It's absolutely true.
Well, I remember back in elementary school, like way back in the dark ages, there were still like dinosaurs, roaming the earth when I was in school. But I remember
Used to
one.
write on a tablet or
Yeah, 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 stone tablet. So it was
stone
it
tablet.
was really hard. Steve Jobs has not come up with the tablet yet. So- but I remember, distinctly, and I was very introverted and shy, which made me a typical target for a lot
Mhm.
of bullies and toxic people.
Yeah.
But there was one particular bully on the schoolyard that I remember, he could never get a rise from me, which was great. And then I would watch from the sidelines how he treated other people, and it was just like
Right.
this gray cloud would just walk into onto the playground. And it would be
Yeah.
him. And what I actually noticed was, people put up with it for the better part of the whole school year. But then something
Yeah.
happened in the spring. Like people are just like, hey, it's almost summer. Like, screw this guy. I'm not going to pay attention to him. I'm not going to let him abuse me. And
Right.
um, something changed. He always was the guy that held the football, right? They we're playing the
Right.
football game out in the playground, and you had to kind of kiss his butt if you were going to be out there, and then you had to take his abuse if you're going to be there. Total toxic
Jeez.
personality. Which, by the
Yeah.
way, knowing him as an adult, he never changed, and has been
Right.
divorced three
Right.
times. Dude, get a clue, right? But what I saw was something that was kind of interesting, and I thought there might be a glimmer of hope in fifth grade. As we
Hmm.
were getting near the end, you're going to move on from elementary school and go to middle school, et cetera. Maybe, this kid would grow up. One day he showed up with the football and nobody came and nobody showed up and everybody
Wow.
went and did stuff and, swings,
Yeah.
jungle gym or whatever. And second day showed up, nobody came. And you'd see
Wow.
him out there, and I remember watching, and I can still see this vividly all these years later, him just throwing the football up to himself, like,
Hmm.
I don't care, I'm defying you, I'm out here playing with myself,
Right.
which doesn't sound good, but he was just playing
No.
football. um, and then the third day he's like, what the heck, right? He could not get
Hmm.
anybody's attention, so he walked over to the monkey bars, right, where we were all
Hmm.
trying to break our necks on crazy moves. And
Right.
he put the football down and just started talking to kids. And
Wow.
I thought by the time we got out of fifth grade that maybe there had been a lesson. Like I watched the
Right.
entire school basically just ignore him. And then suddenly he so desperately needed to be acknowledged that he
Right.
found that he walked over, and it was odd because he looked shy and insecure and very out of place, and
Hmm.
people were nice to him, like got him on the swing set and got him up on the monkey bars,
Yeah.
and then thought, man, this would be great. Show up for the first day at sixth grade, kids back to being we're on LinkedIn so I can't cuss, but
Right.
a bozo, let's just go there.
Right.
But and subsequently has continued to be a bozo into his adult life. But it is funny though, because I noticed as a young child the power we have of choice. And it's true in every environment
Yes.
that we're in today, that you can choose to be there or choose to not be there.
Hmm.
And when you choose not to be there, the bully's got nobody to pick on. The toxicity
Right.
can't boil over because you're not around it. And so I think that there's a real powerful lesson there from how you can kind of handle that, and ultimately what you can do with that. So, hopefully that gives
No,
some insight.
definitely.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, the power of choice too, Steve, is about power of how you are going to respond or react and how you want to feel. If you're in a situation that
yeah.
you absolutely, for whatever reason, cannot just step away or leave or whatever, work on choosing how you're going to feel. How do you want to feel in this? Empower yourself in that way, and it'll already help change your perspective and your experience of whoever you're dealing with.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we have one last question. It looks like from
Sure.
Pamela S. Pamela, I'm gonna see if I can put this up there. Oh, now it's working again. I've stopped getting on social media because it seems full of
Hmm.
toxic people. Well, I mean, you're
Yes.
here. Thank you for, I don't know. I
I
guess you're
know.
coming in on Twitter.
How
So
do we take that?
thank you. Thanks for, the exception to
Hmm.
the social platforms to come join conversations with Asha and Steve. But
Right.
what do you think about that, Asha? Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of toxicity in the social networks, right?
I mean, there's toxicity everywhere, Steve. I mean, you look at the news, you look at the news, whatever. There's toxicity everywhere. Again, it is what you choose to put your focus on. I
Sure.
mean, if you don't have to engage. I mean, you can defriend all like toxic people out of your network. You can block people. You can do whatever it is that's not making you feel good whenever you look through your social media. Just turn it off.
Yeah.
Just turn out that noise. I mean, you don't have to engage into it. A lot of times people engage to it just for the entertainment factor or the drama, but before they know it, they're like sucked into this whole negative pool, and you don't have to.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to choose to engage with it, I mean, with social media especially, I find that it's really you just choose. You just pick and choose who you're going to interact with, who you're going to connect with, and what you're going to do on there, and what your purpose of using it is for as well. It's just like what we had talked about several times about the news, for example.
Yeah.
I don't watch the news. I read everything that I want to know because I don't feel very good watching the news. After 5 minutes, I'm just like, okay, life sucks. I'm depressed. Like this is just there's nobody good in the world, So I know for me, if I want to be cheerful and happy and maybe oblivious to a lot of things, news is not a good thing to start my day.
Well, I mean that's good feedback for sure. But Pamela, I'd say I'm just pop it back up there so people that might be joining late.
Yeah,
I've stopped getting on social media because it's full of toxic people. Not everybody. I will say I try
yeah,
personally to put out some positive thoughts aside from maybe a tweet about Tom Brady last night when he beat the Dallas Cowboys. But I try and put out some positivity, because there is so
yeah,
much negativity, and like Asha said, you have a choice there as well. You can plug in, you can participate, but I often find that you the social networks have been pretty good about figuring out ways to actually help empower its users to decide what they want to see, what
yes,
they don't. And it gets real tenuous around election season or around this, the vaccine and the mask
yeah,
and everything relative to COVID, and those things can be very difficult and can be quite overwhelming to deal with as you see them in your various feeds. But what I would say is that in all due respect to just completely separating from social networks, which clearly you're on one to be able to see us today, so we're grateful for that. But get plugged into the people that actually motivate and inspire
yeah,
you. The good news out there, the good people. There are
yeah,
tremendous individuals out there that are spreading good things out on social platforms that are quite, in my opinion, quite powerful and quite opposite from the negativity you often see in the social networks.
right.
And, will a few things generally pop into your feed that maybe, kind of turn that, toxicity meter up? Yes. But you also have those
Hmm.
controls to say, I don't want to see a post from this person. I don't want to follow this person. I don't want to be
Exactly.
friends with this person any longer. And those networks will provide you with the means of kind of culling the herd, if you will, from a social platform. Because there is a lot of positivity out there that can be
There is.
garnered at any given day. You can plug in because there's people around the world utilizing these platforms to spread, you know, more, more positivity, kindness, and
Hmm.
inspirational stories, and great blogs, and great books, and articles, and things that that will actually help your day and actually help you, find some additional lines of inspiration or motivation. So I'm just a big believer that you don't let the bullies win, don't let the toxicity win, and don't let them
Right.
you know have you completely turn a blind eye to the power of what some of the good stuff that happens with social networks is. And when you find people that you've been connected to or people that you don't respect or admire for the negativities that they put out there, it's super easy to just unlink in from them on LinkedIn, or unfriend them on
Right.
Facebook, or just stop following them, or block them altogether. Like, we talked about family members earlier. I have somebody I blocked
Right.
from my family. I don't want that individual knowing anything about me. I don't want them, having anything to do with anything I'm doing on the social platforms,
Right.
predominantly because it gets used, they try and utilize it as a mechanism for creating more arguments or fights. So, that's what I've
Yeah,
chosen to do, but I didn't get off social media because of that one person. So it's just a thought.
exactly.
And like
That's good.
Asha said, I too like have gotten to the point where I'm just reading the news as opposed to watching a lot
Yeah.
of the news. Certain points, just to, so that I just don't feel that heaviness of all the crap that's going on out there in the world. Not burying, I don't think Asha is implying that either one of us is burying our heads in the sand. We just choose where we put our
No,
attention, right, and our time.
no, exactly. I mean, you know what? Whatever you focus on, whatever you choose to focus on is what's going to grow more into your life. So just shift your focus,
Shift it.
focus
Yep,
on the positive, just
absolutely.
shift it and focus on the good.
Well, and so speaking of positivity, I have to put a plug in
Yes.
one more time for Dr. Asha's new book, The Chrysalis Awakening. Just very quickly, I forgot our overlays all kind of jacked up. So
I'm
I'll just
like,
put it right
where do I
there.
need to go?
So, whoa. Asha's like, hey, don't cover my beautiful face. What are you doing?
No.
This is what happens when you give me control. You probably should have done it. Here, look. There you go. Let's talk about the Chrysalis
No,
Awakening.
no, oh God.
Tell everybody a little bit about the book, and actually it couldn't be more relevant in terms of timing of the book
Right.
itself. I think that just give us a quick little 30-second blurb about the book itself.
Yeah. So definitely, this is my newest book, The Chrysalis Awakening: 5 Questions for Rediscovering Your Purpose and Potential in Uncertain Times. So this book is really it's a guide to really help you no matter what uncertainty. And I see this also. Some of the exercises I was thinking about in this book that I've written about can really help people dealing with toxicity and
Yeah.
negativity that's in the world, because we can get so caught up. I mean, uncertain times can mean a lot of different things, and I think right now, because of the fact that we've all been dealing with a lot of unknowns and uncertainty with the way that the landscape of our world is changing,
Yep.
professionally and personally, of everything that we're doing. I just wanted to give a guide for people to be able to dig a little bit deeper and to figure out what it is for them that they want to do and how they can rediscover that passion and potential in their lives. So, yeah, definitely go check it out at the chrysalisawakeningbook.com. You can
Yep.
find out more information about it.
Absolutely. And she's got some great, Dr. Asha's got some great videos up there that will give you some additional insights to the areas that she wrote about the book. It's an unbelievable book. I've read it now twice. I'm going to go through it a third time. There's just that much good stuff in there. And actually, as we think about toxic people, I mean, it is the perfect time. If you're trying
It
to
is.
separate yourself from some of those folks that have had a negative, undue influence on your life, this is a perfect opportunity to go through this process, because the questions Dr. Asha asks will get you thinking about, okay, just where am I right now? Am I going to put up with this boss? Am I going to put
Exactly.
up with this relationship? And if not, what am I going to do about it? And how do I,
Right.
morph into something more? And a lot of times what you find is once you, eliminate toxicity from your life, the toxic people, the toxic noise that's out there, whether it be social
Right.
networks or the news, you are developing into something more significant and so much more valuable. So the Chrysalis Awakening, available
Definitely.
at book.com. I apologize, I didn't have that ready
Mm-hmm.
for the overlay, Asha, my
Okay.
bad. But you can also get it on
Okay.
Amazon, Audible soon, though,
Yeah.
right? Audible very soon.
Audible soon.
Awesome, awesome. Well, so this is another amazing conversation. This was a really interesting one. I want to thank those that sent in questions, and those that may catch this on the replay. Dr. Asha and I always watch the comments on YouTube. Please sign up
Mm-hmm.
for our Conversations with Asha and Steve YouTube channel so that you can get notifications anytime we go live. We also have a group that we've created, a community that we're building off of
Right.
this show. And so, Asha, how do people find that on Facebook, et cetera?
So they can, I believe, Steve, the name of it is the Asha and Steve Community, if I'm not mistaken. It's very original.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
but you can just look for us underneath it. You can get to the Conversations with Asha and Steve Facebook page, and then it'll guide you from there to be able to join the group.
Yeah, I think we somehow screwed up our sign up process because we had the group,
I'm pretty
we
sure.
couldn't create the community with the same name. But I like our community name because I mean that's
I know.
us.
It's just what it is,
I
right?
mean, we would love to have you join us over there. Keep these
Yeah.
conversations going, and those those platforms give you the opportunity to share some conversations with us about what you'd like us to talk about in the future, or what we're,
Right.
questions you'd like answered, or topics that you think would be interesting to see what our perspectives are. Dr. Asha and I, I hear this a lot. You guys are more agreeable than disagreeable. I think that's the good interaction that we have, because we are so passionate
Right.
about helping people wherever they are, whether it's trying to be better from a personal perspective or a professional perspective. And so we're genuinely committed to trying to create these conversations in a way that gets you thinking and gets you, excited and motivated to do something, like remove some of those toxic people from your life, get them out of here, because they don't have a
Get them
place
out.
in your world. Yeah. Out. So, and of course, be sure to check out Asha's book. The chrysalisawakeningbook.com is the website. You can get all your information about that book will be right there, including some videos that Asha's done. You can also find Asha and get a better understanding of her work at drashaprasad.com. The new website. Yeah, there's some great stuff. Definitely get on her newsletter. And you can find out more information about my work at ripplecentral.com. We have links on both of those sites to our different social platforms. So if you want to follow us for a little goodness, please do so. But we always appreciate you guys joining us for Conversations with Asha and Steve. No matter where you're tuning in, whether you're catching this on the rebroadcast or you're with us live, you guys participating means the world to us. So thank you. We will be back next week with another episode of something interesting. Very interesting, actually.
Yes. Yes. Very interesting. Very enlightening.
Yes, very, very enlightening. All right. Until next time, Asha, you take care.
All right. You take care. Thank you so much.
All right. See you later.